a billionaire almost numb to the world, yet moved by an empty lunchbox from his black assistant. Before the sun rose, Amara Ellis was already awake, pressing her only blouse, counting coins for her mother's medicine. The house was small, silent, filled with the smell of worry and faith. She whispered, "God will make a way," then walked into the cold morning air. The world never slowed down for women like her. Black, tired, but unbreakable. At work, Amara smiled through hunger. Each day she carried the same spotless, empty lunchbox so no one would know she hadn't eaten. It wasn't vanity. It was dignity, a quiet armor against pity. That lunchbox held no food, only hope, and it would soon rest on the desk of Dorian Steele, a man whose empire reached the clouds but whose heart had long forgotten how to feel. He didn't know her name. She didn't know her fate, but that empty box was about to feed two starving souls, one with food and one with love. 45-year-old Dorian Steele ruled the skyline of Atlanta. From the top floor of Steele Core Properties, glass stretched from floor to ceiling. It reflected everything he owned and the emptiness behind his eyes. Each morning he stood before that window, watching the city pulse beneath him. Contracts, profits, deals. Numbers obeyed him. People did too. He had built towers that touched clouds, yet nothing could reach him. The glass walls that displayed his success also trapped his loneliness. Since his wife's death 10 years ago, silence had become his companion. He kept it polished, clean, unbroken, like his image. Colleagues praised his discipline. Investors envied his calm. They called him unshakable. But they never saw the man who avoided mirrors because they showed nothing worth seeing. That morning, sunlight fractured across his window, throwing light into a heart that refused to feel. Down below, on the lobby floor, Amara Ellis stepped from the bus and walked inside. Two lives moved toward each other, one trapped behind glass, one carrying faith in an empty box. Neither knew that by sunset, their reflections would begin to change. The office of Steele Core was a world of marble floors and silent elevators. Assistants spoke softly, afraid to break the air of perfection. Amara moved through it like a whisper, always early, never late. Her desk sat just outside Dorian's glass office. Every time she entered, his reflection swallowed her small figure. He rarely looked up. When he did, it was only to issue another order. She organized his chaos, guarded his schedule, made problems disappear. No one noticed the tremor in her hands when she typed. No one asked if she had eaten. From his side of the glass, Dorian saw efficiency. From hers, she saw a man made of stone. Two worlds under one roof. One built on power, one on prayer. Yet something unspoken connected them. The quiet rhythm of survival. When he signed documents, she caught the shadow of his frown in the reflection. When she prayed under her breath, he sometimes paused without knowing why. The distance between them was only a pane of glass. Still, it felt like a universe. Neither guessed how fragile that glass would soon become. Each dawn began the same. Before leaving home, Amara stopped by her mother's bedside. Evelyn Ellis clasped her daughter's hands and whispered, "God will make a way, baby." Those words were breath to Amara. They steadied her when hunger clawed at her stomach. At work, she hid a folded note inside her lunchbox. "Someday, we'll have a better life." She read it quietly during breaks, pretending to eat. Faith was her meal. Gratitude, her dessert. Downstairs, the city roared with ambition. Upstairs, her heart repeated her mother's prayer. No one at Steele Core saw the faith that kept her standing. That night, as she cleaned her box and packed it for tomorrow, moonlight touched the handwritten words. She smiled, tired but thankful. "Maybe soon, Mama," she whispered. Across town, Dorian sat alone in his mansion, staring at untouched food and untouched memories. Both of them prayed in different languages, hers of hope, his of silence. But prayers have a way of finding their target. Soon, faith would reach even a heart behind glass. At Steele Core, rules were simple: results or replacement. Dorian spoke through memos, not smiles. He saw employees as lines on a balance sheet, faces blurred into titles, names into extensions. "He doesn't see people," the staff whispered. "Only progress." He never laughed. He believed emotion was weakness. Efficiency, his only virtue. Amara watched him from her desk. Behind the cold voice, she sensed something broken. A grief disguised as power. She never said it aloud. Instead, she answered every command with grace, each "yes, Mr. Steele" carrying quiet respect. When others gossiped about bonuses, she prayed for her mother's health. When Dorian measured profit, she measured blessings. Two souls worked side by side in different currencies. His made of money, hers of mercy. That afternoon, sunlight hit the glass wall between them. For an instant, his reflection merged with hers. He looked away first, unaware that the mirror had already begun to crack. Morning came with quiet repetition. Amara checked calendars, sorted files, answered calls. Her movements were soft and exact, like music no one heard. Dorian passed her desk without looking. He never noticed the color of her eyes. He never wondered what she ate for lunch or if she had anyone waiting at home. To him, she was order in human form, an efficient rhythm inside the machine he built. She, too, had learned the art of being unseen. Invisibility was safer. It kept questions away, pity away, pain away. Each day began and ended the same. The elevator doors opened. The glass walls gleamed. The city breathed money. Inside that rhythm, Amara's silence filled the space between his commands. At noon, she straightened her desk before leaving for a moment. Dorian walked out of his office, coffee in hand, eyes tired from numbers. The hum of machines echoed around him. Everything looked perfect, until one small, ordinary thing caught his eye. A clear plastic container sat on Amara's desk. It was spotless, not a crumb or stain inside. Beside it lay her notebook, pen aligned with care. Dorian paused. He rarely noticed details, yet this one held him still. The box looked too clean, too empty, like silence made visible. Sunlight slid through the tall windows and fell across it. The reflection on the plastic flickered, catching his face for an instant. He frowned. Was she careless? Had she forgotten her lunch? Something about that emptiness unsettled him. It whispered of effort, not neglect. He looked around. The floor was quiet. Amara was gone, maybe printing or delivering files. The air felt different, heavy with questions he couldn't name. He reached out, almost without thought, and lifted the box. The light shifted again. Something small pressed against the corner. Folded paper. A piece of handwriting waited inside, blue ink against clear plastic. His heartbeat changed. He hesitated only once before opening it. The paper unfolded slowly in his shaking hands. Neat, careful lines of writing filled the page. God, I'm thankful even for what I don't have. He read it twice, then again. The words were simple, yet they cut through the noise inside his head. A billionaire surrounded by abundance, holding proof of someone grateful for nothing. For the first time in years, his throat tightened. He looked at her desk, the worn keyboard, the cup of cheap pens, the seat she filled with quiet grace. Was she skipping meals to pay bills? Was this empty box her disguise? He could buy the city, yet she survived on faith alone. The note trembled between his fingers. His reflection stared back from the shiny lid. Rich, powerful, hollow. He slid the paper into his pocket and placed the container exactly where it had been. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. He stepped back quickly, heart pounding. When Amara returned, she smiled politely, unaware that her secret had just changed him. The afternoon passed in fragments. Dorian sat at his desk, but the numbers blurred. Emails went unanswered. The note's words replayed again and again inside him. A billionaire, stealing her hunger. The thought struck like confession. He tried to focus, failed, and stared through the glass at Amara. She typed quietly, unaware of his gaze. For 8 months she had worked a few feet away, yet he had never truly seen her. Now, every detail caught him. The way she straightened files, the steady calm in her eyes. Compassion replaced calculation. Guilt softened into something deeper, something he could not yet name. When she looked up, he turned away quickly, pretending to read. The walls of glass no longer protected him. They reflected his shame. He had everything, and yet he felt small before her dignity. By evening, the note still burned in his pocket. Light as paper, heavy as truth. He knew the world would not look the same tomorrow. Dorian's voice broke routine the next morning. "Amara," he said softly, "how's your mother doing?" She looked up, surprised. He had never asked before. Her answer came with a pause. "She's fighting, sir. Kidney failure. The medicine costs more each month, but we manage." She smiled, the kind that hides exhaustion behind grace. He nodded, unsure what to say next. He wanted to admit he'd read the note, that he knew, but words failed him. For the first time he saw her not as an employee, but as a person. Thin hands, steady eyes, faith stronger than fear. A quiet strength he couldn't buy. When she walked away, the silence in his office felt heavier than ever. He sat back, heart aching with something new. It wasn't pity, it was awakening. The kind that makes a man wonder what his wealth is worth if it cannot feed another soul. Dorian hesitated outside his office, words caught between pride and concern. When Amara passed by, he stopped her. "Amara," he said quietly, "if you ever need help, anything, please let me know." She blinked, surprised, unsure how to respond. Her smile was soft, but steady. "We manage, sir. God provides." He wanted to insist, but her tone left no space for pity. She carried grace like armor, refusing to trade dignity for sympathy. He nodded, though the words stung more than they should. "Of course," he murmured, eyes dropping to his desk. When she left, her calm lingered in the air. He turned toward the window, city lights flickering below. All his power, yet he couldn't lift her burden without breaking her pride. The note in his pocket rustled as he moved. It reminded him of the hunger she never named. That night, he left the office early, but her words followed him home. Simple, unshakable, God provides. And for the first time, Dorian wondered if faith was something money could never buy. Sleep avoided him. The mansion was silent, its size an echo of his isolation. Dorian lay awake, eyes open to darkness filled with her voice. He saw the empty lunchbox, the folded note, the faint tremor of her hands. He heard her say, "God provides." And he felt smaller than he ever had before. He owned towers, cars, oceans of wealth, yet he lacked what she carried inside her heart: faith, peace, purpose. He rose from bed, pacing through the cold marble halls. His reflection followed him from mirror to mirror, a stranger wrapped in luxury. For years he had believed success was proof of worth. Now he felt bankrupt in spirit. Amara had nothing, yet she lived with grace. He had everything, yet felt hollow. By dawn, he stood before the same glass window that crowned his empire. In the reflection, he no longer saw power, only emptiness. He whispered to no one, "She's richer than I'll ever be." Morning came pale and quiet. Dorian walked into his office before anyone arrived. He placed his briefcase on the desk, then opened his laptop. Her note lay beside the keyboard, folded neatly as before. He read it again, and the choice became clear. Without a word to anyone, he searched the hospital name from her files. The number appeared on the screen, small and ordinary, but it felt sacred. He clicked through the forms, transferred the amount, every dollar her mother owed. No message, no signature, only silence. He leaned back, heart beating faster than any business deal had ever made it. It wasn't charity. It was atonement. He closed the computer and exhaled deeply. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware that one act of quiet redemption had just taken place. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. He hoped she would never know it was him. He didn't want thanks. He just wanted to feel human again. At the hospital that evening, Amara sat beside her mother's bed counting bills. Her face was drawn but calm. When the nurse entered with a clipboard, she looked up in confusion. "Miss Ellis," the nurse said gently, "your balance has been cleared. All charges are paid in full." Amara froze. "That's impossible. There must be a mistake." "No mistake," the nurse smiled. "Someone took care of it." Her hands shook as she pressed them to her mouth. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Whoever you are," she whispered, "may God bless you." Her mother stirred, weak but smiling. "See, baby, God always provides." Amara nodded, crying quietly, her faith renewed by a stranger's mercy. She held her mother's hand and prayed aloud, not knowing that miles away, a man in a mansion sat in silence, feeling, for the first time, like his heart had done something right. 2 days later, Dorian drove to the hospital. He told himself it was just to check paperwork, but his heart beat faster as he walked the corridor. Through the half-open door, he saw Amara. She sat beside her mother, humming softly, wiping her face with gentle hands. The room smelled of flowers and antiseptic, simple human things. He didn't speak at first. He just watched. Her tenderness filled the air more powerfully than any speech. When she noticed him, surprise flickered across her face. Then her expression softened. "Mr. Steele," she said quietly, standing. "I didn't expect—" He raised a hand. "Please, don't get up. I just wanted to see how she was doing." Her smile was tired but sincere. "She's better, miraculously better." He nodded, unable to explain why his throat felt tight. In her eyes there was no suspicion, only warmth. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of machines and whispered prayers, Dorian Steele felt something unfamiliar: peace. The hospital room was small but warm. Evelyn Ellis sat propped against her pillows, eyes bright despite her weakness. Dorian took a chair in the corner, awkward in the narrow space. Amara adjusted the blanket, her movements tender and sure. Evelyn smiled at him, her voice soft but certain. "God sent you, Mr. Steele," she said. The words landed quietly, yet they broke something open inside him. No one had ever called him a blessing before, only a boss, a genius, a machine of success. Now, this frail woman saw something else. He looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "I just wanted to help," he murmured. She reached for his hand. "Sometimes, helping is God's work." Amara watched the moment silently. For the first time, Dorian felt the warmth of belonging. Not power, not authority, just presence. When he left the room, her mother's words followed him down the hall, echoing through the sterile lights. "God sent you." He didn't know if that was true, but for the first time in his life, he hoped it was. Days turned into weeks, and change crept in quietly. Dorian started leaving work earlier. He visited the hospital without a reason, bringing flowers, sitting by Evelyn's bed, listening more than speaking. His staff began to whisper. "The boss has changed," they said. He smiled now. He asked people's names. He thanked the janitor. Amara noticed too. Each visit, his voice grew softer, his presence less guarded. He didn't talk about business anymore. He talked about faith, about life, about things he never understood before. Sometimes he would find Evelyn reading aloud from her Bible. He listened, his hands folded, unsure whether to believe but wanting to. Back at Steel Core, the walls of glass felt less like armor. He caught himself watching the sunset instead of stock reports. He still didn't know what love was, but he was learning what kindness felt like. And every time Amara smiled, he wondered if redemption could look like this: slow, quiet, and undeserved. Spring sunlight filled the hospital room. Evelyn sat upright, stronger now, the color returning to her face. She watched Dorian and Amara arranging flowers by the window. When Amara turned to check her mother's pulse, Evelyn whispered, "He looks at you like a man reborn." Amara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Mama, he's just being kind." But Evelyn only smiled, her eyes wise and knowing. Kindness is where love begins, baby. The words lingered in the air. Dorian glanced over, catching their laughter without hearing the words, yet somehow feeling them. He stayed longer that day, reading aloud while Evelyn rested. When she drifted to sleep, he watched the peace on her face. It was the kind of peace money could never buy. As he left, Amara walked him to the elevator. "Thank you, Mr. Steele," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, Amara, thank you." Evelyn's smile followed them both, bright as a prayer left hanging in sunlight. Rain hammered the city that night. Amara sat reading by her mother's bed when Evelyn suddenly gasped for air. Her skin turned pale, her voice barely a whisper. "Mama?" Amara cried, pressing the call button. Nurses rushed in. Machines beeped sharply. Fear wrapped around her like cold wind. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and dialed Dorian. He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Steele, please. I think she's dying." He didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." He drove through the storm, wipers beating like frantic heartbeats. Lightning split the sky as he sped through empty streets, his mind repeating only one thought: don't let her die. When he arrived, Amara was standing in the hallway, shaking. He caught her before she fell. "They're trying to stabilize her," she sobbed. He held her close, feeling her fear as his own. For the first time in his life, Dorian Steele prayed, without knowing how, only knowing he needed a miracle. The waiting room was silent except for the rain on the windows. Amara sat with her hands clasped tight, whispering to God. Dorian sat beside her, unsure what to say. Inside the ICU, machines hummed. Evelyn's life flickered between sounds and silence. A nurse passed by, giving them a small nod. Still stable, for now. Amara bowed her head, tears slipping onto her palms. "Please, God, not yet." Dorian watched her, something breaking open in his chest. He reached out, covering her hands with his own. Without thinking, he closed his eyes. He didn't have words, so he borrowed hers. "Please," he whispered, "listen to her." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The rain slowed. The machines steadied. In that sacred silence, two prayers rose together, one of faith, one of awakening. When Amara finally looked up, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise born not from power, but from love and fear shared equally. Evelyn's breathing slowed, each inhale a struggle. Amara sat beside her, holding one hand. Dorian stood near the window, trying not to intrude. "Come closer," Evelyn whispered. Her voice was fragile but steady. He stepped forward and she reached out, taking his hand. Then she joined their hands together, his large trembling, hers small and cold. "Promise me," she said, eyes fixed on Dorian. "Promise you'll take care of my daughter with your heart, not your money." The room grew silent. Amara shook her head, tears falling freely. "Mama, please." Evelyn smiled faintly. "This world has enough wealth. What it needs is love." Dorian swallowed hard. "I promise," he said quietly. "With everything I am, I promise." Her grip tightened for a moment, then softened. She looked at them both, peace filling her fading eyes. "Good," she whispered. "That's all I needed." Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city. Inside, a promise took root, one that would change the rest of their lives. The monitors began to slow, beeping further apart. Amara leaned closer, whispering her mother's name again and again. "Please, Mama, stay with me." Evelyn opened her eyes one last time. A smile flickered across her face, faint but serene. Her lips moved, but only Amara heard the words. "Love each other." The screen went still. A long, unwavering tone filled the room. The nurse entered quietly, lowering her head. Time folded into silence. Amara clung to her mother's hand until it grew cold. Her body shook, soundless sobs tearing through her. Dorian moved beside her, arms wrapping around her shoulders. He whispered against her hair, voice raw, "She'll never be alone." The storm outside had stopped. Only the quiet rhythm of rain on the windows remained. It felt like the world itself was mourning. Dorian held her tighter, knowing no words could fix what had broken, but also knowing he would never let her carry it alone. The church was small, painted white, surrounded by oak trees. Neighbors filled the pews, people who had known Evelyn all her life. Hymns drifted through the air, soft as breath. Dorian sat in the back, hands folded, head bowed. He had arranged everything: the flowers, the casket, the quiet dignity Evelyn deserved. But he kept his distance, letting Amara grieve among her own. When she stood to speak, her voice trembled. "My mother taught me to believe in kindness. Even when life was cruel, she said God never forgot us." Her eyes found him for a moment. She was right. After the service, the crowd stepped outside, umbrellas opening against the drizzle. Dorian waited until they were gone before approaching the grave. He placed a single white lily on the fresh soil. "Thank you," he whispered. Then, more softly, "I'll keep my promise." As he walked away, church bells rang in the distance, their sound carrying both grief and grace. Days blurred together. Amara returned to work, her posture straight but her eyes hollow. She spoke little, focusing on tasks with robotic precision. Dorian watched her from his office, heart heavy. The silence between them had changed. It no longer felt professional. It felt painful. He wanted to reach out but feared breaking her fragile strength. That afternoon, he found her standing by the copier, hands trembling slightly. He approached slowly. "Amara," he said gently, "you don't have to be strong today." She froze, eyes filling before she could turn away. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice betrayed her. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "No one's fine after losing someone they love." Her tears fell, quick and silent. For weeks she had carried her grief alone, hidden behind her smile. Now someone had seen it, and she no longer had the strength to hide. Her sobs broke the quiet office. Without hesitation, Dorian pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. The weight she had held for so long collapsed against him. He held her as the world outside continued untouched, phones ringing, papers shifting. Inside that glass room, time stopped. She cried for her mother, for the years of struggle, for the emptiness left behind. He whispered nothing, only words that weren't words. "I'm here. You're not alone." The glass walls that once symbolized distance now reflected something new: warmth, connection, humanity. When her sobs finally quieted, she stayed in his embrace, breathing softly. "I promised her I'd take care of you," he said. Amara closed her eyes. "And I promised I'd keep believing." Outside, sunlight touched the glass, and for the first time the cold office felt like a home. Two broken hearts, finding shelter in each other's silence. Weeks passed in quiet rhythm. The office felt different now, warmer, slower. Dorian noticed how Amara's smile had begun to fade less often. Still, the emptiness of her nights lingered in her eyes. One evening, he spoke softly. "Amara, I don't want you to go back to that apartment alone. There's space in my home, and it's yours if you want it." She hesitated. "It doesn't feel right, sir." "It's not about right," he said gently. "It's about peace." She agreed after days of thought. When she arrived, she found a small room filled with light and white lilies. Above the bed hung a wooden sign, "Evelyn's Sanctuary." He had built it quietly, every detail chosen from memory, her mother's favorite color, her prayer cloth on the wall. Amara stood in the doorway, tears slipping silently. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's what she would have wanted," Dorian said. For the first time in years, the mansion felt alive. Not with wealth, but with the heartbeat of remembrance and love. Night settled over the city like soft velvet. Amara sat by the window, reading her mother's worn Bible. Dorian approached, a cup of tea in his hand. He hesitated before speaking. "You know, I used to believe money solved everything." She looked up, waiting. "But you," he said quietly, "you showed me what wealth truly means." Her breath caught. He continued, voice steady. It's not in buildings or cars. It's in people, in faith, in finding someone who makes you want to be better. Amara's eyes glistened. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, taking his hand. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly. "You were lost," she said softly. "Now you're found." He smiled, the kind that carried both gratitude and awe. For the first time, love didn't feel like weakness. It felt like truth. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying her mother's words. God always provides. Months later, a new sign appeared in downtown Atlanta, Evelyn's Way Foundation. It was Dorian's idea, but Amara's heart built it. The foundation offered medical aid to families who couldn't afford care. Every file she touched felt personal. Every name reminded her of her mother. Dorian watched from across the office, proud but quiet. The same man who once measured worth in profit now found joy in generosity. Reporters called it philanthropy. He called it redemption. At the opening ceremony, Amara spoke to the crowd. "My mother believed kindness was never wasted. This foundation is her legacy, her way." When applause filled the air, Dorian looked at her and smiled. He didn't see an assistant anymore. He saw the woman who had given him back his soul. 3 months later, they stood on the terrace overlooking the water. City lights shimmered below, soft as memory. Dorian took her hands. "You were my miracle, Amara." Tears filled her eyes. "And you were God's answer," she whispered. He opened a small velvet box, a simple ring, nothing grand, just pure. "Will you let me keep my promise forever?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Yes," she finally breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times." Their wedding was quiet, held in the same church where Evelyn was laid to rest. Neighbors and business partners sat side by side. 2 worlds once divided, now one. When they exchanged vows, Amara's voice shook. "Love made us rich long before money did." He smiled. "And this time, I intend to stay human." Years passed, and time softened what once hurt. Dorian and Amara built a quiet life filled with work, laughter, and prayer. The house that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of peace. People often asked how their story began. Dorian always answered the same way. "It started with an empty lunchbox," he said. "Sometimes the richest heart is found inside something empty." Amara would smile and add, "It wasn't the lunchbox, it was love. The kind that asks for nothing and gives everything." They kept Evelyn's sanctuary open to anyone who needed hope. Families came with pain and left with faith. Each life they touched became another proof that love multiplies when shared. When Dorian looked back on the empire he once built, the numbers no longer mattered. He had found a different kind of wealth, one measured in grace, not gold. And together, they left behind a truth simple enough for anyone to remember. Love, not money, is what truly changes lives. If this story moves you, let it remind you to share kindness, because the smallest act of love can still change the richest heart.